That thing was wearing her mother's face. It had her voice, her tears, even the way she stood, waiting for her to come outside. Sarah Mercer was 34 years old, anthropologist, University of Chicago. Brilliant woman, careful, disciplined, skeptical of everything she couldn't measure. She studied the belief systems of isolated communities, the rituals people build around fear, around death, around things they can't explain. She'd done field work in the Andes, in rural Romania, in Southeast Asia. 6 assignments across 12 years. She was good at her job. And she was good at it for one specific reason. She didn't believe in any of it. That wasn't arrogance. That was armor. Sarah grew up with a mother who believed. Not casually, not culturally. Deeply, privately. The way some people believe in things they've seen with their own eyes and cannot explain to anyone else. Her mother kept salt lines across every door in their house. She burned something in a clay dish every Thursday night. Herbs. Something older. She wouldn't walk past a mirror after dark. She whispered things Sarah wasn't supposed to hear. Names. Words. Repeated like a lock being turned, over and over in the dark. When Sarah was 11 years old, her mother had a breakdown. She told Sarah's father that something had been following her, that it had learned her face, that it stood outside their bedroom window at night, wearing the body of her sister who had been dead for 6 years. Calling her name, in a voice she almost believed. Sarah's father left 6 months later, not because he thought her mother was crazy. I think, on some level, he believed her. And that's what scared him away. Sarah watched her mother deteriorate, watched superstition hollow her out from the inside. And she made a decision. At 11 years old, standing in a kitchen full of salt, burned herbs, and symbols drawn on notebook paper. She would spend her life on the other side of that wall. She became an anthropologist to study the disease from a safe distance. Morocco was her 6th fieldwork assignment. She thought she knew how to stay detached. She had no idea she'd already been chosen before her plane even landed. The village has no name on any modern map. The locals call it Dar Alhud, House of the Edge. Sarah found it through a research grant, unexpected, anonymous, that appeared in her inbox 3 months before the trip. Unusually specific. Not just Morocco, not just the anti-Atlas mountains. This village, this ritual, this season. She thought she was lucky. She wasn't. 2 connecting flights, a 4-hour drive south from Marrakesh, then another hour on a dirt road that seemed to dissolve into the mountain. And then a cluster of stone houses the color of dry sand pressed into the hillside. Maybe 200 people. Narrow alleys between buildings that swallowed sound in a way she couldn't explain. You'd clap your hands, and the echo died before it came back. The argan trees on the hillside bent in wind that wasn't always there. And every single door, every single one, had a line of salt across the threshold. Some were fresh, white and crystalline, laid that morning. Some were so old they'd turned gray and hard as compressed bone, fused to the stone beneath. Some doors had 3 lines, 4 lines. One house near the center of the village had so much accumulated salt that the threshold had been raised 2 inches, a pale ridge you had to step over just to enter. Sarah photographed everything. She told herself it was fascinating. She didn't understand yet that fascinating and dangerous were the same word here. An elderly woman named Fatima agreed to be her primary subject. The 2 research assistants who'd driven Sarah from the city both turned back on the dirt road. No explanation. They just pulled over, got out, and started walking the way they came. Sarah didn't find that strange. Not yet. The village went silent every night at exactly 9 o'clock. Not quiet, silent. No lights, no movement in the alleys, no sound, not wind, not animals, not even the creak of an old door. Like the whole place pressed itself flat and held its breath until morning. Sarah thought it was charming, cultural, a sleep tradition tied to the agricultural calendar. She wrote 3 pages of notes by lamplight and fell asleep with her recorder running. She'd kicked the salt line at her door while bringing in her equipment. A 2-inch gap near the left post. She didn't notice. She woke up at 2 a.m. Not from a bad dream, not from a sound. She just opened her eyes, completely awake, suddenly. The way you sometimes are when something has pulled you out of sleep without announcing itself. The room was dark. The lamp had burned out. Outside her small window, the Atlas night was enormous. Black sky, impossible stars. And then someone said her name. Sarah. Not shouted, not whispered, just said. The way you say someone's name when you found them after looking for a while. She didn't move. The voice said it again. Sarah. She knew that voice. She had grown up with that voice. It had read her to sleep, called her down for dinner, cried in the kitchen at 2 in the morning when it thought she was asleep. She would have known it in a crowd of 1,000 people. Her mother's voice. Her mother, who was in Chicago, who had no satellite number, who had no idea Sarah was in Morocco. Standing outside her window in the Atlas Mountains, saying her name. Sarah didn't open the window. Something in her, something older than reason, would not let her move. She reached over slowly and pressed record on her audio device. Her hand was shaking. The voice said her name one more time. Sarah. Then silence. Then nothing. She told herself it was a dream. Hypnagogic hallucination. It's a documented phenomenon. The mind surfacing from sleep, dragging images and voices with it. She'd written papers on it. She knew the clinical term, the neurological mechanism, and the peer-reviewed literature. She knew. In the morning, she played the recording back. Her mother's voice was there. Clear, no static, no distortion. The way she said Sarah, the slight pause before the second syllable, the way the end curved upward, a habit she'd had her whole life. Perfect. Sarah sat with her coffee going cold and listened to it 4 times. Then she went and looked at the salt line. The gap was obvious once she saw it. She refilled it from a bag in the kitchen. Her hands moved, like they'd done it before. Over the next 3 days, Sarah interviewed 11 people. Different ages, different temperaments, a teenage boy who barely looked at her, a middle-aged man who laughed at everything, an old woman who hadn't spoken to Fatima in years. She asked each of them the same question, separately, independently, no overlap, no group sessions. Why the salt? 11 people, 11 different conversations. One answer. So it doesn't follow us inside. Not similar, not paraphrased, not close. The same sentence, word for word. The same flat, recited tone, like something learned in childhood and never questioned. Folklore evolves, oral traditions drift. Every family puts their own mark on a shared story. After 20 years, the same legend sounds different in 10 different mouths. For 11 people to give Sarah the exact same sentence meant one of two things. Either this was a performance for the foreign researcher, or they were all describing something real. And they had learned to describe it precisely, so nothing got lost. That night, Sarah found her laptop open to a photo of her mother. She hadn't opened it. She checked the browser history. The file had been accessed at 3 a.m. She'd been asleep at 3 a.m. On the fourth day, Fatima's grandson came to Sarah's door before dinner. 7 years old, solemn face, very large eyes. He told her, in careful French, that her friend was outside asking for her. Sarah told him she had no friends in the village. He pointed east, past the last row of houses, toward where the dirt road dissolved into open hillside. He said, "She's been standing there a long time." Sarah's research assistant, Layla, had left for the city 2 days before. Family emergency. Sarah had arranged the ride herself, watched the car pull away. Layla was hours south by now. The figure at the edge of the village stood exactly the way Layla stood. Right hip dropped slightly, weight forward on the left foot, arms loose at the sides. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the way she tilted her head. A slight left tilt. A habit Layla had when she was waiting for something. Sarah had noticed it a dozen times over 2 weeks of field work. Sarah took 3 steps toward it. Suddenly, an old man came from nowhere and grabbed her arm. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at the figure. His eyes were fixed on the ground. He pulled Sarah backward, all the way back to her guest house door, and then, very carefully, very deliberately, reached into his jacket pocket and repaired the salt line. He looked at her for 1 moment before he left. That look. It wasn't a warning. It was past warning. It was the look of someone confirming what they already suspected, that it had already started. That evening, Fatima came to Sarah's room and sat across from her and told her everything. She said her grandmother had told her, who had been told by her grandmother, all the way back to before anyone could remember a beginning. Something lives in the space just outside human shelter. Not a ghost, not a spirit, not a demon in the way you imagine one. Something that predates those categories. Something that exists in the margin, between the lit interior and the dark outside, between the door and whatever is beyond it. Every village at the edge of things has known it. Most forgot how to protect themselves. This village didn't forget. It has no form of its own. That's what Fatima needed Sarah to understand. No body, no face, no voice. It borrows them. It watches a person for days, for weeks, and it learns them. The sound of their breathing, the way they move when they think no one is looking. And then it learns the people they love, the faces, the voices, the small habits, the way someone pauses before a second syllable, the way someone tilts their head while waiting. It learns everything. And when it's ready, it wears what it learned. The salt doesn't hurt it. Fatima was clear about that. It's not a weakness. It's a rule, a law, older than any human law, that it cannot cross protected ground, cannot enter where it hasn't been invited. But if you step outside the circle willingly, believing you're going to someone you love, it doesn't need to cross. You come to it. Fatima took Sarah to a room she hadn't been shown. A locked room at the back of the community building. Small, low ceiling, a single bulb. The walls were covered in drawings. Pencil, charcoal, ink, paint, scratched into plaster. Hundreds of faces layered over each other where the space had run out. Men, women, young, old, different eras, different clothing, different hands that drew them. Previous visitors, Fatima said. People who passed through, researchers, travelers, traders. They saw their loved ones standing outside. The ones who drew what they saw survived. The ones who opened the door. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Sarah's eyes moved over the faces, hundreds of them. And then she stopped. Her face on the wall, drawn in charcoal, careful, precise. The small scar above her left eyebrow from a fall when she was 9. The way her jaw sits slightly asymmetrical. Details a stranger couldn't know. Details that took time to observe. The date scratched beneath it. 3 years ago. Fatima said quietly. It saw you before you came. It chose you before you chose us. The research grant, the anonymous donor, the unusual specificity, this village, this ritual, this season. A grant that came out of nowhere and pointed her here like a finger. Sarah hadn't found this village. She'd been led here. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in the center of a room, as far from every wall as the space allowed, and watched the salt line at her door until the sky outside began to turn gray. She thought about everything. The voice at the window, the photo opened at 3 a.m., the figure at the edge of the village, the 7-year-old boy's face when he pointed east and said, "She's been standing there a long time." She thought about the room full of faces. She thought about her own face on that wall, drawn 3 years before she arrived. And then her satellite phone rang. She stared at it for a long time before she looked at the screen. Her mother's number. She knew what this was. The analytical part of her brain, 12 years of field work, published papers, documented case studies, knew exactly what this was. She had sat across from Fatima 1 hour ago and been told word for word what would happen. She knew. The phone rang again. She picked it up, put it to her ear. "Sarah," her mother's voice, crying, that specific, trying to hold it together crying, the small, sharp inhales between sentences. the way her voice went thin at the edges when she was really scared. She said she'd had an accident. She said she was hurt. She said she needed her. Every inflection, every pause, every small nervous habit in her speech, perfect. And then, the voice said something her mother had never said to her in 34 years. "Come outside." Sarah froze, not because the voice was wrong, because it was too perfect. Every breath, every crack, every tremble in the words. But her mother, her real mother, the woman who had spent Sarah's entire childhood pouring salt across doors and windows, would never have told her to cross a line. Sarah lowered the phone from her ear, and for the first time in her life, she believed her. Not the thing outside. Her mother. Sarah looked at the bag of salt beside the door, then at her notebook, then at the recorder still blinking red on the table. And slowly, very slowly, she smiled. Because Fatima had been wrong about one thing. The salt was not a weapon. It was a rule. And rules can be used both ways. Sarah opened the door, but she did not step out. Outside in the dark, her mother stood barefoot in the dust, pale nightgown, wet cheeks, arms slightly open. Exactly the way Sarah remembered her from childhood nightmares. "Sarah." Sarah looked at her. Really looked. Not as a daughter, as an anthropologist. The shoulders were right, the face was right, the voice was right. But the breathing came half a second late, as if something inside the body had to remember when to inhale. Sarah whispered, "No." Then she threw the salt, not at the figure, around it. A white arc across the dirt. The figure stopped. For the first time, it stopped pretending to cry. Sarah stepped sideways, still inside her own threshold. She poured more salt from the second bag, a line to the left, a line to the right. Then Fatima appeared behind her with 3 villagers. No one spoke. No one looked at the thing's face. They only looked at the ground. And together, they finished the circle. The thing wearing Sarah's mother stood inside it, silent now, perfectly still. Then it smiled. Not her mother's smile. Not even close. For 1 second, Sarah saw what was underneath. Not a face, not a body, just the idea of something trying to become human and failing. It moved toward the salt line, stopped, moved again, stopped. The smile disappeared, and then, for the first time in the history of Dar Alhud, it stepped back. It was afraid. By morning, the thing was gone. Not dead, not destroyed, just trapped somewhere between the lines it had spent centuries obeying. The villagers did not celebrate. Fatima did not smile. She only looked at Sarah and said, "It will remember you." Sarah nodded. "I know." She packed her equipment, her notes, her recorder, and before she left Dar Alhud, she went back to the locked room, the room of faces. Her charcoal portrait was still there, the one dated 3 years before she arrived. Sarah stood in front of it for a long time. Then she took a piece of chalk and drew a circle around her own face. When Fatima saw it, she whispered, "What does that mean?" Sarah looked at the wall. then at the old woman. "It means it doesn't get to wear me." 3 weeks later, Sarah was back in Chicago. Her mother opened the door. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah looked down. Across the threshold, a thin line of salt. Fresh, white, unbroken. Sarah started crying. Not because she was afraid, because for the first time in 23 years, she understood what her mother had been trying to do. She stepped over the salt, into the house, into the light. And behind her, the door closed. Outside, across the street, something stood beneath a tree, wearing no face at all. It watched the house. It waited. Then, it turned away. Because some doors, once protected, do not open again. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, would you have opened the door? I'll see you in the next story. Good night.